Hello and welcome. My name is Mark Blatstein, the physician founder of Physician Presentence Report Service. This YouTube is going to be about guarantees and promises. And that before, no attorney, no consultant, no one can make any guarantees to you regarding what any judge will do before they actually put pen to paper, nor what the Federal Bureau of Prisons will do once you get there. And what caused me to make this YouTube is that I was on a conference call the other day. They were great law firms, a couple great law firms, and they did a really great job. But there was one concern I had, and I'm going to address that today. And I addressed the same concern with two of the attorneys, and there were four attorneys. And this is the concern that I had, and that is that the client potentially had sentencing guideline of just a lot of years to be put in prison, and they got the prosecutor to agree to a sentence that would have departed below the guideline range. And all of a sudden, everybody was very relaxed, including, and the client was on the call. And I got nervous because, it's not over till the fat lady sings, so to speak. And so what I'm going to share with you now is what I shared with them. So this is my website. You can always get in touch with me, Physician Presentence Report Service. Phone's around there someplace. But I'm going to come down here to the part that is important. And here it says, judges have been interviewed because they want to hear from you. The personal narrative. In other words, if in fact the attorneys and the prosecutor, everybody has an agreement. Still, this is before the pre-sentence interview has been done. And it's no time for the defendant to relax. It's just not, because there are too many balls in the air. And so I'm going to open this up in a moment. This is a great article. But the judges want to know that you accept responsibility, you have remorse for your actions. They want to know that they're not going to see you back in their courtroom. I learned that the hard way. I mean, I had a felony in 2006. I was grateful in 2010 to get my medical license back to practice again. But the judge did say he didn't want to see me back in his courtroom. I didn't know that meant that I couldn't appeal the indictment. I also didn't know that appealing the indictment really had no value. And I paid for it when I appealed the indictment, when I made that appeal. If there's if you're losing a professional license that you have, all this is important. And so I'm going to open this article up, and hopefully we'll be able to see it in somewhat detail. But it interviews Alan Ellis is an attorney, and he interviewed a dozen or so judges to get their opinion. And so don't believe me, which is what I shared with the attorneys, and I'm going to share it with you, what the judges want to know. In other words, if the defendant, or if you are lax in putting together all this information, which starts with your personal narrative before you get to the pre-sentence interview, then you're going to be lost. So here's the article. It was 2019. This is 2017. It was a magazine article in the Federal Lawyer. But here we go. And so for most judges, there were key questions they wanted answered. They want to know if what have you done to demonstrate that you have remorse? Did you accept responsibility? Was this out of character? Why should they cut you a break? Here is allocution managers at Judge Levy in Maine. What's important is whether they're persuaded that the defendant is sincere and that you demonstrate insight about what you did. Mark Bennett, who I have, he's being interviewed, and I have a YouTube of him interviewed on the website in Iowa, strongly believes in the allocution, and he likes to speak with the defendant. He has a conversation. There's a judge here, Marsha Krieger in Colorado, that says that she's seen allocutions where the defendant has shown that he is sincere, thoughtful about what he is saying. It's important that the lawyer prepare his client for the allocution. In other words, if you're preparing for the allocution, the preparing steps is to write your personal narrative, if you will, before the pre-sentence interview, so that it is incorporated into the pre-sentence report. We have, there's a judge, Jerome Simandel, defendant needs to step up and take responsibility. They take it to heart. Allocutions can make or break what the judge is going to do. They may have an idea when they go to the bench what the sentence is going to impose, but they'll listen to the allocution. This is, the conversation between the defendant, which is you, and the judge. Judge Lawrence O'Neill in the Eastern District of California, there has to be some acknowledgement of what happens. It's a huge mistake not to take the opportunity to allocute. So where are you going to begin to, kind of get the insight of what you're going to say? It starts with drafting your own personal narrative. It's a very big thing. And you can find this article on my website. There's a Judge Brendar here. There's another, it's a judge here. It says if it sees a pre-sentence report saying the defendant, these are pet peeves of other judges. This is Judge John Adams. If they see a pre-sentence report where the defendant is spending a lot of money on luxuries, it doesn't look good. If you're driving around in a $900 a month car and you're not paying restitution, it doesn't look good. And so it's very important that you're paying attention, if you will, to the details. And this starts with taking the time to draft your narrative. And why do I say drafting a narrative is important? And all of this is part of the allocution with the judge, or the conversation. So I'm going to go over here, and this is a pre-sentence interview. And, if you want to go to trial, you may think, well, you're going to go to trial, and thinking to go to trial is okay, but just thinking that you may be innocent is not enough, because only 0.4% may be acquitted. That's not high odds. So you need to be prepared, and it's probably the biggest meeting of your life. And so while I go through steps 1 through 5 here, as far as preparing for this pre-sentence interview, I'm going to jump here to the probation report. And the probation report, my hope is that you have taken the time to, one, the probation officer is going to give your attorney a list of things that make up your biographical background and personal identification, and they need copies of everything, which includes medical, financial history, everything, and you have copies of all that. In addition, you're going to provide a personal narrative, which is your history or your story of your background, which explains what, your childhood history, what brought you to this point in your life that would cause you to break the law. Judges know the crimes don't happen in a vacuum. They want to know why. They want to know why they're not going to see you again in the courtroom, which is that article I just reviewed with you. And for the purposes of the conversation that I was involved with the other day, just because the legal teams had the okay with the prosecutor that they were going to get a very good sentence departure beneath the guidelines, if you will, from the prosecutor, everybody was going to be in agreement. The judge could listen, everybody has a bad day. And if the judge got out of bed on the wrong side of the bed and had a bad day that morning, he may not agree to that agreement of a sentence reduction. And so here we have, this is basically all the information that the judge is required for you to make copies of everything. Plus, you're going to provide them the personal narrative. They're then going to fill in a probation report. We're going to open that up here if they can get that done. And they're going to fill this in. And from this probation report, then they're going to draft the official pre-sentence report. So this stuff at the top is your personal identification information, biographical information, etc., your background characteristics. This is going to consist of places you've lived. All this stuff, biographical background now, but it'll be used, everything that you give them should allow them to fill out this information right here. But you're providing it to the probation officer 1 to 2 weeks before your pre-sentence interview. Why? So that first of all, the probation officer will appreciate it because they are busy. They have no time. So that when they have a moment, they're able to fill this in. So by the time all of you meet for the actual interview, this will be filled in, and they will be able to casually get to speak with you personally, get to know who you are. And they will appreciate the fact that you came to this meeting prepared, and maybe will have a more positive viewpoint of who you are now, and possibly pass on a recommendation for a lesser sentence, maybe a placement request, possibly. We don't know. But it's a lot better than going into the pre-sentence interview and being rushed through this entire process. So you'll be able to give them, all this information now they will have available to them ahead of time. And you'll be able to, at the same time, you will have listed from childhood, you grew up, and what your life was like. You had brothers, sisters, were your parents working? Were they not working? If it was a drug case, were your parents in and out of prison all the time, or no? Were you from a privileged home where only your father worked and your mother was a stay-at-home mom? All of that gets put into here. What was the family life like at home? But as you can see, where you're putting in the relationship between you and your siblings and your parents, these are the spots, and then they're going to be able to fill out this form with all of the information now that you will have provided. And so, were there health problems? Were your parents in and out of prison, or were both of your parents hardworking? When you went to school in elementary school, was there enough food for you to eat, or did you have to rely on food, from the elementary school and high school to eat there? Who did you spend, if it was a divorced household, who did you spend most of your time with? All of that goes into straight through. Did you go to college? High school? Did you go through and finish with your GED? Did you work while you were in school, or did you go straight through? Was it simple for you? Good grades, not good grades? As you grew up, were you married? Domestic partner? Did you have a divorce? How many marriages did you have? Do you have children? Did you not have children? Who was in charge of making decisions? Was it a comfortable marriage still, or was it a domestic partner? Are you still together? Were you working? Was your partner working? What did you do? What kind of work did they do? Was anyone arrested before this? Was your first time? Were your parents ever arrested? Siblings? All of that information is in your personal narrative, much more organized than I'm explaining to you. But I want to I give you the idea that everything needs to be complete, and a narrative is going to take you a long time to write. Your narrative is your autobiography or your brand. For example, Tesla's brand is SpaceX. Nike's is Just Do It. This is right now, your brand is just your indictment, and you need to change your indictment to a degree if you can. Is there a history of substance abuse? We're using drugs. Was your parent, did they use drugs? Siblings use drugs, or no drugs, alcohol, what have you? Do you know who you may want to live with, or are you still, will you be living with that same person when you're released from prison? Children's names. Their parent, age of parent. Are they in custody? Are they custody of your spouse or other person? Again, is there any spousal support? Are they in legal custody? Do you have visitation rights? Is there stepchildren? All of this you're weaving into your history as you've grown up from a child into what brought you to this point in your life where you broke the law. So it is your autobiography history. What impact has your behavior or this event had on others in your life? If you have children, how's it affected them? Your significant other, your spouse, your wife, your girlfriend, your parents. What are your future plans regarding family? Physical description of birthmarks. I'm sure you know all of this. Here you're going to go into, went too fast, physical health. You want to list all of your medical conditions, hospitalizations, everything. Everything you have, anything medical has to be listed. You need to get copies from each of your doctors, copies of all of your records, all of your hospitalizations, all of your pathology reports, if you've had surgeries, all your blood tests, all prescriptions. If you need further explanations on that, please look to my website or give me a call. All prescriptions for all medications, all allergies for any kind of food, a list of all doctors' names and their contact name, address, phone number, website, and for what they are treating you for. Have you had counseling for any sort of medical? Again, it's a complete history, medical history and mental health history. If you've had any sort of mental or emotional problems, again, I'm showing you this probation report that they will fill in because I want to impress that the narrative has to be comprehensive, which you want nothing to be left out. Because once you surrender or are remanded to prison, you need this record as a baseline for yourself. If you've participated in any sort of counseling before, you want to have that, listed the dates. If you've learned anything from your counseling or treatment, if in fact any sort of legal or illegal drug or gambling contributed to your offense, in other words, alcohol, drugs, legal or illegal gambling, and on your own before your indictment or before your pre-sentence interview, and you started some sort of Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, or some sort of psychiatric therapy on your own, then you want to include that. And then you also want to include documentation from whatever service or physician or whatever records that you can get to verify that you're either ongoing or that you've completed. If you had any sort of history of substance or alcohol abuse, you want to put that in here. And if you were in a program, again, I already covered this, were you clinically discharged or were you under the influence, you want to have all this listed in here. Highest grade level completed. I don't care if you're a physicist or an attorney or a doctor. You want to have copies of your diplomas because if you don't have verification, they're going to make you get the GED. All right. So if you get specific gifted schools or programs, all of that should be down here. The caveat is that if in fact you had excellent extra certificates in computer type skills, well, I would maybe leave that out. Whatever hobbies you had. Identifying professional licenses. Here's where you can put in that if you had a professional license like I did and I had to give my license up, if it's the only, this was your skill, this is going to be a hardship. You want to go ahead and put that in here and identify it as such. What are your future educational goals? If you're in the military, branch of service, highest rank, etc., you want to have all this in here so that you're able to provide this information to the probation officer so they can fill it in. Employment. If you work for yourself, for myself, I worked for myself since I opened my practice in 1985, then I was able to put that in here. You want to have name, address, employer. So they're going to go ahead and check. And having good employer references, judges like to see. And if in fact you have have an employer who is willing to say that they are willing to rehire you after you are released from prison, that's a great letter for you to keep. But they need to say that they know you have a problem, a legal issue, and they're still willing to rehire you. And what's the perfect job? There's, many different topics in here you can go through. Accept responsibility, how you feel about committing the offense. These are, all topics that you need to begin to think about because there are different aspects of accepting responsibility. But this helps you put your thoughts on paper as you go to begin to write your narrative and allocution. Criminal history. Hopefully there's not a lot here, but if there is, you need to fill this in. And there's no reason it doesn't do any good to hide it. If you have detainers, you need to make sure that your detainers are taken care of ahead of time. If there's anything else here that you need that applies to you, you need to go ahead and fill this in. If there are future plans regarding family and relationships, what are the future plans for employment, future plans for treatment, et cetera, education. So I cover all this with the hope that you understand that is, or I'm trying to give you an understanding that that's the reason for the personal narrative. There's much more that is covered here on the website regarding what goes into the pre-sentence report and for the pre-sentence interview for the pre-sentence report. But the main reason for this is that no one can guarantee you, to summarize where I started, there's no guarantees or promises that even though, and I'm sure you have a great attorney, great legal team, and they've worked out a good agreement, honest agreement with the prosecutor that there will be a sentence recommendation below the guideline. Don't rest on your laurels because the work is just beginning. And a large or the majority, a portion of it, all of it before the pre-sentence interview rests on your personal narrative. I hope you found this helpful and stay safe. If you care to engage my services, at least consult or no charge, and I would be more than happy to speak with you. Have a safe day.